China Watch Radio is brought to you in part by Sushi Market Sprouts on 7th in Santa Cruz and Kaito in the Capitol Mall Food Court. Treat yourself to the finest Japanese cuisine you'll find anywhere with fresh sushi to go and delicious ramen dinners. Sushi Market Sprouts and Kaito. Yum! Very good afternoon to you. I'm Bill Graff, along with Jonty McCollier, and we are here with China Watch Radio. Michael Olson is still traveling today. First of all, good afternoon, Jonty. How are you?
I'm very good, thanks, Billy. It's great to be here again with you. I had a blast last week.
Yeah, it was a good program. We enjoyed it. We got a lot to talk about today. Let's just remind folks that China is a place of ever-changing and ever-moving news, and there's a lot going on. If you've been following the national and international news at all, you know that several things have happened. Jonty, where do you want to start? You want to? I guess we should start with the big headline: Yahoo is no longer in China, per Yahoo's own volition.
That'll be an interesting one to cover. I have a bit of perspective on Yahoo from some personal experiences that I'd like to share. It does certainly indicate a dramatic change of the times, no doubt. Yahoo was once one of the more kind of go along to get along companies when it came to China.
You know, a couple of other things that have happened. If you happened to be in the Shanghai Disneyland, you were horrified and surprised when you were locked into the park recently. That's a big story.
Yeah, that does. It does sort of show the difference in approach to, I think just the method in which you treat people in general. I mean, we here have been going through a lot of struggles vis-a-vis the mandates and what is the proper role of government in healthcare. And a lot of people have praised China for their let's call it proactive stance with regards to the spread of the coronavirus. My hunch is that the most proactive thing that China's done is hide the actual numbers. And so they've been able to go and say to the whole world, hey, we've really had a pretty easy time here because we use authoritarianism to control the spread of disease, when what they're really doing is they're just hitting delete on all the numbers of fatalities. Some people have been projecting that they may have had something in the order of 1.7 million fatalities as a result of the coronavirus. Who was it? It was actually a large organization that was saying that. At any rate, yes, we'll certainly get into that. But Billy, where I really want to start is talking about that article that we have up on China Watch Radio under the Know Before the Show section, which is a 5 trillion. Oh no, wrong one. Sorry, let me get to the right one. That's last week. Which is competing with China requires engaging the developing world.
Yeah.
This is where I think the rubber really hits the road, and it's unfortunately ignored so often in favor of the whole how many submarines have you built, which is something we can talk about later on in the show if we get around to it. While everybody's running around in a tizzy because China has launched a quote-unquote hypersonic missile, which looks to actually be a technology that Russia deployed in 1968, what's really happening in terms of the power structures in the world is that the Western countries are acting in a very insular way to form up alliances between each other while ignoring the global South and doing a very bad job of having a sort of partnership with the global South. While China has a very different approach to the situation, they see a huge opportunity in Latin America and in Africa and parts of Southeast Asia, where the sort of Western development models, and they really do seem to just be dropping the ball. In my impression, I would love to find out that I'm wrong about that.
Well, China sure seems to be more engaging. There's no doubt about that. They're going to countries you never think they would go to engage those countries in commerce and trade and influence and everything else.
Well, I mean, I'm from I'm from Johannesburg originally. I mean, I've been in the U.S. most of my life, but it gives me a bit of perspective on South Africa. And then I also I've got a buddy that I visited Senegal with a couple times in West Africa in 2007, 2009, something like that. And it's very interesting to see what's happening in a lot of Africa. I think I've mentioned before, maybe on the show, that Nigeria stands to be a superpower by the end of the century. I mean, if Nigeria was a stock, I would invest in Nigeria. Nigeria is going to have a larger population than the United States. It's an oil-producing country. It's got like 10% GDP growth and things of that nature. I'm just sort of talking off the top of my head here, so don't quote me on that exactly. And it does sort of beg the question: what's happening in Africa in general in terms of development? Africa is a place where I saw this in 2007 in Senegal. We drive down the road, and you're actually watching the power lines be put in. So places that haven't had electricity are about to get electricity. The first time I landed in Dakar, the airport was this sort of rundown joke of an airport. It was definitely kind of a quote-unquote third world sort of airport. The second time I flew in, it was 2 years later, this incredibly modern airport. And there's just freeways being built in every direction. So the economic growth is extraordinary. A lot of these countries have natural resources, oil, all kinds of things that are actually generating a lot of wealth. I mean, you can pitch up with a handful of high-quality electronics, and the word will just get out that you have them, and people will be showing up to buy them at a premium for cash. So the economic development potential of a lot of these parts of the world that tend to just be ignored by the whole sort of Western business culture is extraordinary, and I think very unfortunate for both sides of that agreement. But let's drill down a little bit more into this article. Let me just read the excerpt here, and then maybe we can go over a couple of the particulars.
All right.
Okay, so reading from the article. Whereas the United States is primarily concentrated on shoring up ties with Asian and European allies and partners, China is casting a wider net in its competition with the United States. While jockeying for influence with many of Washington's European and Asian allies and partners, Beijing is also focusing on a much larger geographical space that includes Africa, the Middle East, Latin America, and Southeast Asia, regions where U.S. economic and development initiatives are lagging. Actually, Saudi Arabia is interesting because it looks like Huawei is helping. Saudi Arabia is doing some crazy things. They're on their west coast, they're close to the Suez Canal area, I guess. They're building an entire city. Forgot the name of it now. But they're building an entire city that is just hardwired to be the city of the future, essentially.
And as I understand it, it's going to operate somewhat like Hong Kong does.
Oh, in what way?
In trade. It's set up to be a real trade hub.
That's right. They're going to have special rules vis-a-vis tariffs and exchange of
sure. It's a place to come and trade capital, money, and resources.
Right. That's right. And it looks like they're ending up partnering with Huawei to do a lot of this stuff, to build AI, Huawei and
sure, why not?
Alibaba to build. I know. I mean, you see the problem here, but Saudi Arabia is not. They're not exactly big fans of democracy.
No, not at all. By the way, just so you know, Jonty, I've just been informed that that Amy is back from her trip and is on the KSCO line.
Oh, thank goodness! I was a bit concerned we hadn't heard from her. I'm so happy to hear.
Hi, Amy.
Yeah.
Hi, Amy.
How was your trip?
Hi, Billy and John. Very good. I just reported in. I just got back from 3 weeks vacation in Europe, and I visited 5 countries.
Wow.
So I wanted to report to you guys something about this trip, and maybe something about I was focused on what's happened in those places right now, is any Chinese influence or whatever. But so far, I can tell you something very strangely. There's not a one Chinese tourist group, not a one. You don't see any Chinese there.
No
I don't
Chinese
know.
tourists.
No, disappeared. No, not a one. They used
that's
to always
interesting.
charter a Viking used to catering to that. A couple of ship was the Viking ship with all Chinese tourists. No, not anymore. Not a one.
Wow.
I don't know what's going on.
So,
Yeah.
Amy, let me ask you, what's your speculation? Do you think the Chinese government is preventing travel?
I don't think they get a visa. And, I'm talking about not the visa the country let you to visit. It's get out, exit visa to visiting. They don't issue anything.
Yeah,
So they cannot come out. Yeah, I don't know. Just honest and disappeared. And I visited 5 countries, Czech Republic, Slovakia, and then Hungary, and Austria, and Germany. And then I arriving, fly from here to Munich, and then via to Czech Republic, arriving Prague, and it was very, very quiet, almost empty airport. And anyway, I don't know if you were noticed about that, because the Czech Republic and the Prime Minister was visiting Taiwan. So China tried to boycott them. Yeah. And before that, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, so that's for the reason. And then, those tour guides, everything, people I talked to, and they all seems like a pretty much anti in China's those globalization and to ruin their, tourism industry. Because all the gift shops, right now, still about 90% of everything is made in China.
Right.
They used to have, Czech was an industry country, they have a lot of things. They can make everything. They have their own, craftsmen, toys, everything. But now, after China come out, so everything made in China. But they advise us not to buy anything, because those are all phony. Those things are not made in Czech. So it's not their real stuff,
Oh, I
But
see.
probably,
I
think...
Sorry, I remember in Scotland. This is a long time ago, of course. In 2009, talking to an owner of a gift store who was almost in tears because they had all these kilts there, but none of them were. They were all made in China, and he was really distraught about it. I wonder how that's developed over the years, if that's still the case, or if there's been if there's starting to be a shift in that regard. Now, Amy, let me ask you something about that part of the world that absolutely fascinates me. But you'll often hear me talk about population decline, and Eastern Europe is at the forefront of decline. Italy actually was a little bit ahead of the rest of Europe, but the population is going down in that part of the world by close to a 1% or so a year. Did you see any sort of signs of that?
Oh yeah. Especially in Germany, I think that they have since 2015. I think they have 1 million refugees coming. So you don't even believe it. Like Frankfurt Airport, I don't even believe it's Germany. Just like a third world. I can't believe it. That's I had to talk about their government, but right now Angela Merkel is gone, so they said, and lots of people said, I didn't know he was there for 16 years. That long?
That's quite a while.
Yeah. And then it's kind of the direction is kind of go to socialism more than other Eastern Europe countries. The reason is that those countries like Hungary and Poland, and they wanted to exit EU, the
that's
European Union. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
they not agree with lots of things. They feels like a Soviet Union control again, the planned economy or stuff like that. But
They're
I'm
more
talking about this.
resistant, perhaps, to that because they've had a much more recent experience of what that's actually like.
Yeah, I'm not against the immigration, but I think they should integration after immigration coming. The reason is, right now in Frankfurt Airport, they hire lots of people from the refugees. They don't speak German, they don't speak English, and put them to do, helping. In our group, have some old people, they need a wheelchair or something. And so those kind of service is performing by those new immigrants. But they don't speak the language. They don't even know how to call people's name. Also, the attitude is pretty bad. I think that they bring back their own,
Well, immigration is can have many different faces, and when immigration is largely caused by military adventurism on the part of the United States and to a lesser extent France, coming along and orchestrating the destruction of Libya and Syria and Iraq prior to that, that causes a certain type of immigration that's not necessarily a very healthy form of immigration. It's a pretty different situation where you have some sort of measured process wherein you are allowing people into your country for reasons that essentially that you want them to be there and they want to go there. So it can be a very positive thing. The United States accepts about 1.3 million people into the U.S. every year legally.
Yeah.
That's not illegal immigration. We legally accept that many people, and because of that, the United States is in a position to thrive, while the rest of a large portion of the Western world is actually suffering from depopulation, from the decline in indigenous populations. Some people have speculated that part of the reason why there were so many refugees brought into Europe was to try to prop up the population so they wouldn't be sort of dropping off a cliff quite so fast.
Yeah, otherwise they don't have the labor, nobody work, because it's keeping decreasing the populations. Yeah, so they really desperately need the labor. Young laborers from other countries. Yeah.
When you joined us, we were discussing the dynamic wherein China is focused on Latin America and Africa and Southeast Asia in terms of development and building economic relations, whereas the U.S. and Europe tend to kind of drop the ball in those parts of the world. And one of the aspects of that, in my mind, is that China is quite aware that their population is dropping off a cliff. They have the oldest population of any major country in the world, and they're looking at population decline of somewhere between 40 to 70% over the next 100 years. I think China is actually also looking out into the future and thinking, how can we build a relationship with places that have people, that are going to have lots of people going out into the future?
I think part of that discussion, guys, is the fact that China, up until recently, kept its population in check with the one-child policy, but now they've realized that they can't maintain the population of the country going forward unless Chinese people have more children, and they're going to need some labor. And I think that's one of the things that around the world, various countries that are having populations that are falling off are finding themselves in the same boat, so to speak. They all have looking forward, they have a population issue coming up.
Well, let me just Let me just read a couple of the things from that article. Congo and Botswana have signed on to the Belt and Roads Agreement. Tanzania has agreed to a $1.3 billion contract for a new rail line. This is all with China. Djibouti has a deal for a $3 billion expansion to their main port. This is all pretty proactive. Last time on the show, we were discussing how Congo and Uganda, I think it was, are in a position to provide China all of the iron ore that Australia has traditionally been providing. So there's a sort of shift in China's sort of looking at the situation and saying, well, if you guys want to play hardball with us, then we're going to go and develop economic relationships with all of the places that you've been traditionally ignoring. Now, the U.S. has been making dramatic overtures with regards to improving infrastructure development in various parts of the world. Some of the things that they mentioned in that article as well is that the U.S.'s Build Back Better World program and the Development Finance Corporation, they've very recently formed, have some little minor flaws in that the infrastructure finance is required to turn a profit. That's one of the that's sort of one of the items it has to check off, and that's certainly not China's perspective. China doesn't seem to really care very much if the Belt and Road projects end up being quote unquote profitable. What they're interested in is it profitable in a bigger sense? Is it geostrategically profitable? Is it profitable in some way that's difficult to foresee 20 years from now? Is it profitable in that?
Let me translate that.
Yeah.
Will China have greater influence in the area they're helping to build things in?
Right.
That's basically China is looking to have worldwide influence, and if they don't make any money initially, that's not part of their plan, really.
Well, that's one aspect, but also think about the value of building a railroad. You can build a railroad, and that railroad can lose money. But the fact that railroad is there and operating can make an enormous amount of money for a variety of other businesses.
True.
Just like we saw with building freeways in the U.S. in the 50s. Sorry, Annie.
I don't believe they will be successful, especially in those African countries.
Really?
Johnny, you're from South Africa. You probably know about it, right? So you really think like a British Empire, and they will completely lose the war? Or I don't think it's going to happen. Especially for China. China actually never colonized any country in the history. Never did. This time, they think, this government, I think, for recently, they think they can do something like a kind of ambitious. Before, never even showed that much, because in history, they never did.
Right. Well, that's very interesting that you mentioned that. What comes to mind, Amy, is that one of my cousins in South Africa was describing how that's sort of exactly what's happening right now. China is forming small colonies within South Africa where folks are coming over to work on various projects. The South African government, very corrupt, is entering into deals where they are only going to hire Chinese companies and Chinese workers to work on projects in South Africa, which has a 50% unemployment rate. And these little enclaves are being constructed where there's a town where everyone in the town is Chinese and the police are Chinese and the infrastructure is all being built by Chinese companies. And, my folks in my South African family are shaking their heads and thinking, what the hell's going on here,
Yeah.
It is a form of colonization, and one has to wonder about I think we do more than wonder on this program about the true nature of the Belt and Road agreements. Seems to be a quote unquote win-win situation where both of those wins go to the Chinese Communist Party.
I think in the last week, you guys talking about the Taiwan, the China gonna occupy Taiwan or something. And I receive a lot of the video clips and talking about the Chinese government and tell the people to get some food, prepare the war. So they're everywhere with the people fighting, getting rice, all kind of things. Unbelievable that. Never seen that before, for a long time now. And then the government officially tell them to have it, to get some money, spend all your money to buy whatever the rice and the basic things and store it. So it's going to have a war. I don't know, is it purposely or whatever.
Well, now I've heard that as well, Amy, but I haven't heard specifically to prepare for a war. That's very concerning if that's the case. I know that China's had some very serious problems with agriculture
big time.
In a sort of a long-term pattern. They've been getting rid of some of their best farmland to build pointless development.
Yeah.
But
true.
Also in the short term, there have been a lot of environmental concerns.
Flooding has caused quite a big farming problem. I have an article on that. Maybe later we can get into that. But huge farming districts are currently underwater in China. There's not enough food. So I think that might be behind what Amy's talking about, where the government's ordered people to stockpile as much food as they can because when the current supply is done, it may be a while before some more food comes out of the farming regions.
Yeah, they're talking about the tourism. They were promoting called internal circulation. And that's why they don't let people out to visiting outside. So they want the people to visit in China and to spend the money in their own countries. So internal circulation or something, that's the promotion is. So they're traveling inside of China, yeah.
Well, it's interesting we're talking about all this because one of the things that Jonty and I prepared for today's program was the fact that although China is starting to make inroads around the world in various countries, as we've been talking about, they also have been making some mistakes in what they've been doing. Really quite interesting about how some of the mistakes, remember how the Soviet Union made a bunch of big mistakes? Well, China's making some of those very same mistakes, as Jonty pointed out in some of our literature for today's program.
Right. We have an article up on China Watch Radio under the Know Before the Show section with the title, China has started making the same mistakes as the Soviets. I found that a very interesting, compelling assertion. Yes. I'll just read a brief excerpt here from an expert, hopefully. Both lessons have now been... No, don't worry about that. Chinese rhetoric and policy have a distinctly Cold War feel. Xi argues that the East is rising and the West is declining. He has called for a new long march, an echo of the communist struggle for survival in the 1930s against a hostile America. Party officials are making military threats against the U.S. and its allies. Wolf warrior diplomats chastise American officials publicly in tones reminiscent of Cold War rhetorical clashes. Now, it's one of the things that I think is very important to keep a careful eye on here is this whole arms race situation that seems to be dramatically accelerating.
Well, it's interesting how it's being reported too, Jonty, because we there was a lot of fear mongering going on in the press here last couple of weeks about this apparently hypersonic missile, which apparently is technology that's been around for quite a while now that we read the fine print.
Right. That's right. But we still have General Milley going around saying it's a Sputnik moment, which. I think that's actually exactly what it is. If one were to go and look at what actually happened when Sputnik flew over the United States and everybody completely lost it about how the Soviets were going to take us over within a few months, what happened was the U.S. freaked out and started developing and building ICBMs as quickly as they possibly could. And then the U.S. flew a satellite over Russia. Actually, maybe it was U-2 planes. And we saw, at first we saw what the analysts described as a whole ton of missiles. Oh my God, they're building a lot of missiles. What they were actually looking at was a pipeline being built. And they were misinterpreting it in this sort of hysterical state. But what ended up happening, because the United States was pushing so hard to develop all these ICBMs, the Soviet Union turned around and went, "Oh crap, guys, we got to build ICBMs because look, they have them."
Exactly.
And then we were in a bona fide arms race after that.
Yeah, it heated the whole thing up.
So, I'd like there to be good, decent deterrence. I'm an advocate for responsible military spending, but I also like to point out situations where you get these headlines. Another one, we have an article up today. China's satellite crusher, Space Pearl Harbor is coming. This is Gordon Chang. I love him. I think he's very insightful, but he's definitely a hawk, and he definitely pushes for military spending and et cetera, to counter, in quotes, the Chinese. Now, what they're describing here is a satellite that has a little arm on it that can kind of move around geostationary orbit. The assertion here, China is saying the point of this is to go and collect space debris. This is an area where humanity could actually blow it for ourselves long term.
Yes.
We could just blow it. I mean, it's a situation where if we have a limited, small-scale space war, we could never be able to launch a satellite or a spacecraft again. Because debris in space is deadly to spacecraft.
Well, Jonty, I've said this many times on this program and on several others that I participate in occasionally here at the radio station. If I had if I won the big Powerball lottery, I would invest a large chunk of the money I won in a company that could eventually remove space junk. Because I think that is, I want to be the world's garbage man for space debris.
Right.
You laugh, Amy, but there's a bunch of stuff floating around up there that causes a bunch of problems. And if we could get rid of it, if you could get rid of it, you could make a pile of money and make our space thing a whole lot safer for everybody on the planet.
That's absolutely correct. It's such a big deal. I mean, you got to understand that a little piece of space garbage can be a solid piece of metal traveling several times faster than a bullet.
And all it's got to do is, every once in a while, there's twice a year, I think, if I remember the story correctly, twice a year where everybody in the International Space Station puts on a spacesuit and moves to the center of the spacecraft for, I think, 3 or 4 hours because there's known space junk that's going to come whizzing by, and it is possible that it might actually hit the space station. So for a couple of hours twice a year, they all suit up in spacesuits and get in the safest part of the spacecraft just in case.
Right, absolutely. I think there's 100,000 pieces of space junk that are being tracked. So China's saying we're sending this thing up to try and collect space junk and get rid of it. Gordon Chang is pointing out that we sure hope that the Chinese don't consider U.S. military satellites to be space junk. But just to keep the context here, so the idea is that the United States does not possess comparable technology. That's one idea. So that's an assumption. I can't say if the U.S. does or doesn't, but I think the U.S. has been working on that kind of thing for quite a long time.
Look, I don't think we should write the United States military and United States spy agencies. I wouldn't write them off as being behind anything.
Well, the reason why he's calling it the potential for a space Pearl Harbor is that the United States has so many more high-tech satellites than China does, than any other country does, that's considered a vulnerability for the U.S. because we use those extraordinary technology much to our advantage. So we right now have a huge advantage over any country in the world because we've got 10 times more satellites, way higher tech, way more expensive than anybody else. And we might lose that massive dramatic advantage if this one little satellite with an arm on it were to go around and without anybody doing anything about it, disable a bunch of U.S. satellites. One of the things they mention here at the end of the article that it was kind of interesting is Elon Musk's SpaceX building the Starlink constellation.
Oh, man, that scares me. You know what? That really does. I don't know how he can be allowed to put that much debris, because that's what it's going to end up being. I think it's, 6,000 satellites?
42,000 satellites.
Okay. They've upped the number.
One of the things it says
So
here
already
is,
completed?
No, they're in
No.
the process of a few at a time now.
No, but the article says that can be used by the satellite-dependent U.S. military. So Elon Musk gets all of this largesse and all of these tax breaks, and he gets away with all this stuff that he does all the time. Oh yeah, by the way, if it came down to it, maybe the U.S. military could just kind of borrow his 42,000 satellites for a while if they needed them,
or just flat out buy them.
Right. I mean, what is the relationship there? I don't know.
Well, we have an interesting relationship now. I don't know if you guys know this, but our GPS, all of our GPS stuff on the, in your cars and in your phone and all that stuff is all part of one giant GPS system. And the only difference between our version of the system and the military's version of the system is our civilian part of it is dumbed down slightly. So that instead of, getting down to, an inch and a half, ours gets down to, an eighth of a mile. But, but the GPS is being utilized from the same satellite network.
That's interesting.
So,
yeah.
So the military guys get to have pinpoint accuracy, down to the down to the inch. And our car, tells us the exit's coming up in a quarter mile.
Right.
But it's basically the same set of satellites.
Right. Yeah, I mean, one of the we always talk about how the U.S. is a free market, and I think it's always important to realize that there are limits to that concept. We have aspects of our economy that are free market. There's aspects of the Chinese economy that are a free market. But certainly at the higher levels of high-tech corporations and certainly within anything involving aerospace technology, it's very difficult to have an organization that operates at that level that's entirely separate from our military, essentially.
Yeah. Hey, listen. Since we sort of have Amy here, we planned for a slightly different show, but I'm fascinated to hear about Amy's observations. There are very few Chinese people traveling in groups around Europe, for instance, where she was, and I want to bring up this story about Disneyland in Shanghai, because I think the two things are maybe related. I certainly wonder why there aren't Chinese people at this time of year, especially out traveling around in groups, seeing the world. And I wonder if that idea that Amy mentioned, that she didn't see too many Chinese groups anywhere around Europe, and she traveled to she went to 5 different countries. It seems to me that this story that came out of Shanghai, where the Chinese government showed up, locked down Disneyland in Shanghai, and then a whole bunch of personnel in hazmat suits showed up and went through the crowd and basically checked everybody out to see if they were COVID sick. They took a whole bunch of temperatures. They asked a bunch of questions. They did, it went on for hours, apparently, freaking out everybody. I don't know how many people Shanghai's Disneyland holds.
I think it was 32,000.
32,000 people at once could not leave the park until the Chinese officials that came in hazmat suits were all happy that they apparently were COVID-free. Now, I don't know if the two are related, but it sure sounds fishy to me.
Yeah, also they reported that everything, the COVID case, is from outside. That's so every day they reported. They say, this city now they have, 400, but 350 is all from outside. Outside the country.
Do you
Bring
think
it in.
do you think that doing something like locking down Disneyland and doing this whole this whole spectacle, do you think that's actually theater for the Chinese Communist Party to say to their population, look, this is how seriously we're taking this?
Yeah, I think so. That's part of a propaganda game.
I mean,
my wild guess
here is that they have a serious problem with the coronavirus. And the Chinese people know it.
They never tell the truth.
But they're in this truth bubble where they don't really have a way to sort of. Sorry.
I just don't believe they reported say most of the cases the people bring in the coronavirus from different countries. They always say that. I don't believe it. But they can say anything they wanted, right? And then actually, it's hard to get into China right now. You can't get a visa. They reject everything. You have to have a meeting the family, have an emergency, and a hospital, certification, say your father and mother is sick, almost died, then they will give you a visa. Otherwise, they don't give you anything. My friend applied for 3 months, finally get visa. He had to quarantine in airport, the hotel, had to pay for that, and for 2 weeks, and then they release you to your own home for another week. You cannot get out.
Wow!
Until 3 weeks, and he tested totally negative. Negative for all the time. So I don't understand because he's from America.
Well, if you look at
everything from it,
if you look at it from a huge population point of view, I can understand why the Chinese government may be operating like this, because if they get a few people sick and they travel, inside China, then they have such a huge population that I don't know that they could kick out that much vaccine to inoculate everybody all at once. It was a monumental task for us to do it here in the United States, and for the rest of the world to finally catch up. China has the population of half of the planet all in one country.
Well, they've actually, by my understanding, have been moving very quickly to vaccinate the population. It's all these vaccines. I have my doubts about, very strong doubts about, frankly. A lot of folks are saying that the Sinovac vaccine, there's another one, is at about 35%.
Yeah, I've heard that it wasn't very not very effective.
But China has been very effective at using that vaccine in diplomacy, where they've made agreements with, I think, Peru and Chile and other parts of Latin America to provide masks and vaccines. So that's a way for them to develop economic relations and possibly create some financial liabilities on the parts of the populations desperate to get this stuff, while the U.S. goes around doing their third and quite possibly fourth booster shots,
Well, listen, guys, we have a call. Steve in Pacific Grove has been waiting for a while. First of all, before we take Steve's call, I just want to say, Amy, it's good to have you back on the show. We were hoping you were going to have a good trip through Europe, and I find it fascinating some of your observations already about how very few Chinese people have been traveling in groups. That's pretty amazing. But anyway, let's see if we can get Steve on. Let me put Steve on this line over here. Steve, you're on China Watch Radio.
Hey, guys. Poor old Cecil Rhodes must be turning in his grave over the Chinese colonizing South Africa after all the stuff he went through with the Boer Wars and all that stuff back in the day.
Yeah,
you guys know what I'm talking about, right?
I certainly do.
But what I'm curious is this vaccine stuff. I mean, what's going to be, when you start looking at the long-term picture, as far as the Chinese go, what is going to be the next vaccine? I mean, what's the next step as far as, aside from just being a virus? We know that you have an idea it might be a virus. As long as you have free thoughts, it might be a virus. I mean, these guys, they're pretty heartless. And I kind of think of it as like the old Greeks sending out their, back to the Mediterranean, making their colonies in Carthage and stuff. The Chinese are on it. I think they know when the universe gets blasted away from a couple of computers going wrong, they're going to be in sail ships and stuff. They're going to have all of their little colonies all over the place. I know I'm going off in the deep end, but I think they got it planned like 200 or 300 years from now, when there is no computer. Well,
hopefully, Steve, part of the discussion that we have here is to be able to compare and contrast the authoritarian forms of government with the more liberal forms of government. So the liberal in the traditional use of the word, meaning that you believe that free and open discourse with other people, rational discourse, hopefully, is the best way to make decisions. Whereas the authoritarian perspective...
They don't care. Look what happened in South Africa. Have you seen all the riots and all the stuff? All the buildings burned down and all the people going over there and wiping out all the farms and stuff? They don't show that here. You know what I'm talking about. They wiped out South Africa.
I mean, there's a lot of pessimism in South Africa and a lot of very negative things that are happening. The murder of Boer farmers or traditionally Afrikaans farmers is something that fails to be addressed in a meaningful way, even though it is clearly a form of genocide. And there were some very severe riots a couple months ago. I was talking to family over there who was saying, we're just staying inside and waiting it out, and it was by and large, economically destructive. It wasn't helping a country.
Just like Venezuela. I mean, and just like Venezuela, they're coming up here from the border. I mean, hey, you got to give them credit. You got to give credit where credit's due. Imagine if the Chinese had the San Joaquin Valley under there. They wouldn't be building a bullet train to nowhere. They'd be building aquifers. They'd be building water so you can grow things in a place you can grow stuff, not dealing with Gavin or Mordred and Cruella Pulowski just doing their weirdo commie stuff. They'd be doing stuff and kicking ass. You got to give the commies a little bit of credit. At least they get stuff done. But the way they do it isn't right. But
well, listen, Steve, we appreciate the call. I've actually got some other calls I want to get to, and we're running out of time here on the first hour. We want to thank you for calling. All right, let's move on to Tom in Santa Cruz. Tom, you're on China Watch Radio.
Okay, so a couple topics. I was in Scotland in 2020, and in Edinburgh, mainly the goods were British or UK made.
Oh, Tom, your phone is dropping way out. Can you maybe talk right into the microphone? It started out good, but it's pretty bad right now.
Is it better now?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay. In Edinburgh, Scotland, I was there and mainly UK and Scottish goods. But the most interesting thing was I met a group of 25 to 30 Chinese people in the National Museum. And since I've had the privilege of traveling in China, I asked them why were they in China in January in Scotland. And they were from Wuhan, and they did not have permission to travel anywhere in China, but they could go anywhere else in the world. So they picked Scotland because it was cheap.
Huh.
That's a good reason. That's a good reason.
And this was 2020 in January. The other thing is in 18 and 19, I did a Caribbean cruise, and I went to every island except Jamaica, Haiti, Cuba, and the Dominican Republic. And every one of them had a soccer pitch, a hospital, or an airport that was built by the Chinese with a large block of housing for the Chinese when they came over to build or to visit. So I think that we have a problem right offshore that we really need to be addressing and open our eyes to.
That's a very good point. I've often thought that Haiti is such a big problem, and it's right next door to us. Basically, it's a short flight away. So,
Well, Billy,
got-
maybe when we come back from the break, we can discuss the article about the bipartisan bill that's in the House right now to do exactly what we're talking about, which is to examine China's use of economic coercion and the opposite of coercion in order to figure out and actually articulate an effective response by the United States.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Listen, Tom, thank you for the call. We appreciate it. We're out of time for this first hour. We're going to take a break, and we'll be right back on China Watch Radio, so keep it right here. Satisfy your hunger right now with the delicious ramen and sushi you'll find waiting for you at Kaito. Easy in and out location in the Capitola Mall food court. Special orders welcome. Fresh, delicious, and oh so good.
This is Koji. I'm looking forward to seeing you at my restaurant, Kaito.
The wait is finally over. Shenyun returns to the stage with an all-new production filled with beauty, majesty, and a powerful message of hope.
The performance was enchanting, completely captivating on so many different levels.
I feel better about the world. I feel uplifted.
You are not just watching a performance. You are witnessing a culture reborn.
It touches you. It really does. Every American needs to see it.
Thank you very much to the director and whoever created it.
Now, you'll see what the modern world has never seen. China before communism.
We didn't want to miss this. Have to come. Life-changing.
Come see it.
Make sure you see it. Make sure you see it.
Come see the performance that has touched the hearts of millions. Shenyun. Coming to San Francisco, San Jose, Berkeley, December 22nd. Tickets at shenyun.com/CA, 888-633-6999.
People do not like going to the dentist unless they're going to this dentist. Hello, folks. Michael Olson here with Dr. Guy Peabody. Well, doctor, you work with a lot of people who haven't been to the dentist for a long, long time. There's got to be a little fear there when they show up in your office.
Yeah, it's funny you asked that. People are worried when they first come to see us that they haven't been to the dentist in a long time because they're afraid they're going to get berated. And I chuckle at that because we're here to help people. We assure them that we have today and the future, and we're just going to take good care of them, and everything's going to be fine. The most important thing we can do for them is listen to them. We want to find out what their concerns are. We want to find out who they are as people. We want to know if they're apprehensive about dental care or not. We want to know what their goals are. My job is to mainly find out how I can make them happy, and I can't do that unless I know what's going on inside.
Call Dr. Guy Peabody for a consultation today and wake up to a beautiful smile tomorrow. 831-457-0343 or visit drpeabody.com.
Buying for a business? Let Batteries Plus be your partner. Whether you have one location or many, you'll find solutions for all of your battery, lighting, phone, and tablet repair needs, plus volume discounts and more. Sign up for a free business account at batteriesplus.com/business. Batteries Plus.
Well, that first hour went by in a fast hurry. Jonty and Amy and I will be back on China Watch Radio in just a few moments. We do have to break for some national news and some local traffic and weather, and then we'll have the second hour of today's program. This is China Watch Radio on AM 1080 KSCO Santa Cruz. Go to ChinaWatchRadio.com for all of our show information for today. We'll be back in just about 6 minutes.
With gusts up to 25 knots this afternoon. Wind waves 1 foot, west swell 5 to 7 feet at 14 seconds. Tonight, northwest winds 15 to 20 knots with gusts up to 25 knots. Wind waves 1 to 2 feet, west swell 9 to 11 feet at 14 seconds. And tomorrow, west winds 15 to 20 knots with gusts up to 25 knots. Wind waves 1 foot, west swell 7 to 9 feet at 14 seconds. The time now 6 minutes after 3 p.m., and that means it's time for the second hour of China Watch Radio.
China Watch Radio is brought to you in part by Sushi Market Sprouts on 7th in Santa Cruz and Kaito in the Capitola Mall food court. Treat yourself to the finest Japanese cuisine you'll find anywhere with fresh sushi to go and delicious ramen dinners. Sushi Market Sprouts and Kaito. Yum! Welcome to the second hour of China Watch Radio for this Thursday. I'm Bill Graff along with Jonty and Amy. And you, give us a call at 479-1080, 479-1080. We'd love to have your comments and have you talk about what we're talking about today. Hour number 2 now, Jonty. We have Amy here, so a little bit different focus on the program than what we planned, but that's good. That's fine. I was mentioning when we started the program about China's influence around the world and how they are reaching out to try to bolster their lot in the world these days. How do you want to talk about this? You want to talk about the article first?
Yeah, let's just give the audience a little primer here. So we posted an article in our Know Before the Show section on ChinaWatchRadio.com under First Look, New Bipartisan Bill to Counter China's Economic Coercion. I'll just read you an excerpt here. The People's Republic of China China's increasing use of economic coercion against foreign governments, companies, organizations, other entities, and individuals requires that the United States better understand these measures in order to devise a comprehensive, effective, and multilateral response. That's a quote from that's kind of the introduction to the bill. Put forward in the House by Representative Amy Berra, Democrat from California, and Representative Ann Wagner, Republican from Missouri, among many other folks who are supporting this. Now, it sort of sounds to me a little bit like, let's have a meeting to discuss what we should have a meeting about. So it doesn't seem like the strongest bill I've ever seen, but it seems like the intention here is to pull a whole bunch of folks from top positions throughout the government to put them all together in a team to have them really sort of brainstorm solutions to the problem of things like China blocking Norwegian salmon imports after a Chinese dissident lawyer received a Nobel Prize in 2010, or restricting Chinese tourism to South Korea when Seoul deployed a U.S. missile defense system, Chinese tariffs on Australian barley and wine after Australia called for an independent inquiry into the coronavirus. Don't forget those Australian lobsters that were left to rot in port as well.
And the coal.
The coal is
don't forget the coal that's been.
I don't know why how can they leave out the coal? Yeah. So at any rate, this task force is going to sort of look at this and try to figure out, well, what can we do? Because we have we are proponents of this idea of free markets. And China's not too worried about that. The CCP is quite happy to say, don't buy this product for a political reason to whatever company or whatnot, or don't go to this country. No tourists in this country for this political reason. For the U.S. to start doing something like that, it's kind of, here we are saying that's the wrong thing to do. You shouldn't do that. And we're gonna fight you by doing the same thing, So we're in a kind of catch-22 here. I understand why, but you need to get some smart people together to really figure out a solution to this.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, though, Jonty. Isn't this somewhat the idea of tariffs? I mean, is this not kind of what happens when you talk about, trade restrictions through things like tariffs or monetary penalties if you do certain things? You know what I mean? This is sort of
I have two answers to that. One would be yes, absolutely, but tariffs are intended to protect industries. They're intended to provide economic benefits for any particular country. They're intended to prevent another country from dumping a surplus of a particular product into your country. And then the second thing is that while that is the intention of tariffs, at the same time, we've had a trend that started in the 90s. Well, it started even before that, but it started to really accelerate in the 90s under the Clinton administration toward mutually lowering barriers to trade and establishing international norms such that we could foster international trade. Now, whatever a person feels about that personally, I see the dark side of that quite a lot. But that has been the argument by and large, is that countries should be opening themselves up to other countries.
And yet we find with Amy's story just today that tourism from China is being curtailed in some manner. Firsthand experience from a woman who's traveled to 5 countries recently and travels around the world frequently. No Chinese tourists in any of the 5 countries Amy visited.
Right. Not to mention the caller. The caller earlier said that they were encouraging people to go and visit places when they shut down China. Sorry, Amy, please go ahead.
No, I just talking about additional to that, and when I visiting some village in Hungary and some small town in Germany, I was thinking, can they live without the China? We're talking about separate supply chain, maybe this, that. But my feeling is, yes and no. For instance, like clothing or something at this point, probably 80-90% still is made in China, kind of thing. The locally, they used to have some industry, especially Germany. And now you have to find anything made in Germany. I'm talking about clothing, even scarf, the hat or something. So hard to find anything is made in Germany. And the food, talking about the food. And I don't think they have any problems. They have a tremendous amount of different delicious sausages, hams, and the beer, drinking, wine, no problem, It's nothing in China. Nothing is all local products. So,
right,
but China have a problem with the food. They do, even pork.
If any of you have seen a chart of inflation in the United States over the past 20 years or so, you'll see that there's been extraordinary cost increase for healthcare, for housing, for medical, for education, while at the same time there's been a drop in the cost for luxury items like computers and television sets and things of that nature. So it kind of begs the question here. I get the general feeling, and then I think I could back this up if we were to really dive into it, that the globalization process by which the U.S. and to a perhaps lesser degree Europe have become very dependent over the last 20 years on cheap electronic items and cheap items in general from China, has been at the expense of a variety of other goods that we could, if our trade imbalance was a little more sane, if our monetary system was a little more sane, we would be paying less for our house and more for our smartphone. And if that meant that the electronic devices were made domestically, and were done so with humane labor standards and things of that nature, I mean, there's an argument that one could make for a situation where Eastern Europe is quite happy to maybe do with less for a little while and build more local markets as time progresses, than to be in this kind of lopsided relationship with a major world power that doesn't necessarily have their best interests in mind.
Well, it's a good point, but getting back to what Amy said about food, food is one of the few things that we can't really do without. You could do without a brand new smartphone, but you got to be able to.
That's right.
You got to be able. You got to be able to eat. And one of the things Amy pointed out is really quite prevalent in today's news as we were preparing for this program today. Amy points out that in Europe, they don't have really too much of a problem with food, good local food grown in whatever country it might be.
I went to a couple of farmers markets. Fantastic. They have everything. Fresh vegetables, fruit, you name it. And so good, looks very nice. And I asked them about the pandemic cost, is the economy slow down and inflation or anything. And so I talk about the gasoline. And they say, we're not sympathize you because we always pay much more. It's true, $6 or $7, $8. So we're complaining about our 4, but I find out we were panicking, right? So that we're never complaining about that. But other things, they have their way to live. They think Americans overspend. For instance, okay, the T-shirt very expensive, like a 10, 12 euro per, but they only have a 5 or 7. So Americans have a dozen or more. It's true. They buy less.
Right. Yeah, they buy less and utilize it until wear it out till it's done.
Some people, I'm talking about, I have to donate 10 coats because it was old. Actually, you still can wear it. But we just buy more because it's cheap. And also in the fast food, and they never have a buy one free. Never have that. Like hamburgers. No. They just buy one that's one because you only need one. Why have to get another one, right? It's different way.
So to contrast what you're saying, then in China right now, the farmers are grappling with all kinds of issues: flooded fields. It's too cold in some parts of China to grow anything right now. It's really a mess.
I saw lots of video. Unbelievable. They're just fighting. I mean, the bigger war fighting and to get things.
Yes.
Because the government told that you had to store something.
Well, they have the additional problem of no electricity. In parts of China right now, they're rotating the electrical power to various grids because they don't have enough power plants running to supply the entire country all at once with electricity. And it's a trickle-down effect into the farming industry because they can't use pumps in some areas because there's no electricity. They can't. They have problems, and so China is worrying about feeding 1.4 billion people. It's
that's the number one.
Yeah, and
number one question.
That's a big,
but not sufficient. They can't. They're buying lots of import a lot.
A lot of food. That's right.
Not good. Not good. Yeah.
People talk about China invading Taiwan, and one of the ideas that comes to mind there, would the United States be able to defend Taiwan? And one of my thoughts there is, does the United States have to? Because all the United States would have to do is park a couple aircraft carriers in the Indian Ocean, close to the Strait of Malacca, and maybe a few other points, and any supply ship that's heading towards China, they just tell them politely to turn around and go back home, and that would put China in such a difficult position. They're looking at something like 40% of their GDP is based on their export market, and they rely so heavily on the rest of the world to feed them.
Well, China. People forget that. We think China is farming methods are backward compared to how we grow things here, but they have things in China like greenhouses. As a matter of fact, they grow lots of vegetables in plastic tarped greenhouses, plots of eggplant, garlic, celery, things like that. But right now, in a couple of the major growing regions in China, as all of those greenhouse areas are currently underwater. They've been flooded.
That's right. Yeah.
So they have a real problem right now, and so I just thought I would sort of point out what Amy was talking about. What she's seen is a good indicator of what may be happening inside China that they really don't want us to know about. I think there's a good point to be made there that maybe President Xi, as we said in last week's program, maybe trying to do some things like save face and consolidate some power before the big meeting, because
something's going on, Billy, and it's getting very interesting.
Jonty, you were watching the internet, the website all over by China. Do you see anything really somebody reported from the China CCP, from real China? Any report? Very few.
It's so difficult to get. I mean, so much of what's official over there is just
heavily censored.
You got to take it with such a large grain of salt.
About anything,
but here's a couple things to just sort of which catch my attention with regards to this potential food shortage situation. For the sake of the Chinese people, I certainly hope that they have enough to eat. Also, for the sake of the Chinese people, I hope that they at least dramatically change the direction of the CCP and/or please, hopefully, work towards a more humane form of government. And to quote Bob Marley, a hungry mouth is an angry mouth. So one would sort of wonder what the political repercussions of such a circumstance would be, particularly for a much more authoritarian leader who's taken the country in a far more bellicose direction, and it's having a variety of very real costs as a result. And one thing I just want to point out here that's worth noting is that whenever there's been a climate summit, she has been very excited to join the climate summit and tell everybody how fantastic China is at building solar panels and whatnot, which, I mean, we all know is a bit of a joke coming from the largest polluting country in the world and uses half the coal and whatever it is. But he's always been gleeful to do that and to use these events to push brand CCP on the rest of the world. He wasn't really invited, or it's not clear if he was invited to the COP26 meetings was in Glasgow. And he's actually saying, well, the reason I didn't attend, I would have attended remotely, but you guys didn't send the link. I mean, I just want to laugh, It's like, Billy, I can understand if we're trying to get a host on or something like that, and they don't get, the right link or the right number to call it or something like that, I can understand. But this is like the largest, one of the largest economies in the world, and one of the biggest meetings in the world. And you guys forgot to send the link.
What's also quite funny about that is China has some of the best hackers on the planet Earth. They could find the link.
Right.
I mean, really.
That's right.
What begs the question, what's really going on here?
Absolutely. I mean, that's what I keep saying. Look, China has arguably, in the history of the planet Earth, except for maybe Nazi Germany, China has the best propaganda system ever devised. They can kick out propaganda and false information and slanted views of what's happening with the best of them.
They can pay the New York Times to give them full-page spreads on this stuff. So
absolutely. So the information we're getting out of China, in many cases, I'm positive, isn't the complete or even remote truth.
But still, I think that Xi might be in some real trouble here.
Well, see, that's what we pointed to last week. Amy, unfortunately, wasn't with us last week, but she heard part of the program on the ship, and she was talking to me in the break, the news break at the top of the hour, about the fact that there is some real concern about who will be in power after the big meeting we've been talking about. Every 10 years they get together and have a big a meeting of the party, and they powwow and they talk about how the party's going to move forward. And it's frequently just a consolidation of power for whoever is in charge at the time. Well, we spoke last week about this, and you're welcome to go back to our archives and listen to last week's program to get the full discussion. But basically, we are noticing that the current president of China is trying to consolidate power and maybe having some trouble doing that.
Wouldn't it be amazing if we ended up with a Chinese Gorbachev?
Yes, it would be fascinating, and it would also probably be very good for the people who live in China.
Wouldn't it be amazing if
it's a wishful thinking.
It's probably wishful thinking. Well, but what happens in that sort of power struggle is that a new group moves in and they punish the old group. They blame the old group for all the mistakes. Now China has a tradition of.
Normally, every meeting, every conference, they will come to the turn. They negotiate it because they have a common interest to keep the money. So those oligarchs, so the end, it was everybody said, okay, we can fight. If we fight and one the other, so that's it. We all go down the same boat. So we had to hand together. Yeah. That's every meeting.
Does that sound vaguely familiar to you?
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, really, that's you were talking about the new guy comes into power and the old guy gets blamed for. Well, does that sound familiar to you? It sounds a lot like our political system, doesn't it? The guys who are out of power, get blamed for all the bad stuff, and the guys who are in power, and then when they get replaced, then the same thing happens, right?
Yeah. Well, China has been on a course over the last 70 years where usually these upheavals lead to more authoritarian government and more draconian measures with regards to the people. Though there was, I do kind of feel, and Amy, I would love to know your perspective on this, but maybe over the span between Kissinger's meeting in 1979 and
1972.
72.
1972. Yeah.
Oh,
long time ago.
Seems like only yesterday.
Sorry, it was Nixon, and it was Nixon in 79. I'm getting things mixed up. But at any rate, in that sort of maybe 10, 15-year time span, I certainly got the impression when I was there in 98 that there was this state apparatus. I did, on one occasion, have somebody who I'm convinced was secret police come up and sort of question me, but we ended up just playing hacky sack. It wasn't. I didn't feel like it was that oppressive. And I know there's some.
Jonty, that's because you gave him the right answer to whatever question he asked you. Had you given him the wrong answer, you'd be in jail.
Yeah, the answer was let's play hacky sack. Well, I know that there's been some YouTube bloggers whose the name is escaping me right now. Michael Olson's a big fan of this guy as well, who went to China in the early 2000s. They were very excited about the place, and it was so easy to travel, and they were doing these travel blogs all over China. And then they ended up, around about 2015, they started getting real uncomfortable about the way things were changing there. And by, I think, 2017, 2018, they were back home in the States, totally disgusted. So I wouldn't be alone in having the impression that there was a kind of lockdown on the culture and society there of the past 20 years, which wasn't so much the case in the decade or so prior to that.
Hey, listen, guys, I just realized we have a caller. Shirley's been on the line for quite a while. Let's see if we can get Shirley on the air with us. Thank you for waiting. It's my fault. I did not notice you on the phone board, Shirley. You can come down.
That's okay. I just wanted to comment on this real fast. In 73, over 30 years ago, we were on safari in Kenya and Tanzania, and I noticed that the roads were really bad in Tanzania. They were falling apart, but Kenya's were really nice. And then 30 years after 73, I was doing safari again, and Kenya's had become potted. They were just horrible to drive on. But as we went into Tanzania, it's like you could have been sleeping and you could feel the difference. The roads were so smooth. And I soon heard that the Chinese were building the roads for Tanzania. But since the Tanzanians didn't have the money, I was wondering, how can they, they're a third world company, how can they be paying for that? Well, China was taking their geology assets, whatever minerals and so forth that are valuable and are only in so many places. And now, with Italy, I remember they had a horrible time with the pandemic, because they had so many Chinese living there, building their new harbor. So it sounds like, and they couldn't get loans from all the Western countries, so they ended up having China do it. And so they're doing that. I was sad to hear they're doing that all over Africa, and like you all mentioned earlier, a lot of the different third world countries.
Yeah, a lot of Latin America.
And, yeah, Latin America too, which is really scary. But hopefully they won't. Yeah, I didn't realize they were putting their colonies in there basically, but that's why they had so much trouble in Italy, because they had all these Chinese workers, which meant they probably had their whole families there and everything. And I do remember I was in Bryson, Zion, and the Grand Canyon about 3 years ago, a year or so before the pandemic. And I noticed, I was just seeing the Red Rock country, but the Chinese tours were everywhere. I mean, they were, you couldn't even see the views because they were taking up, a busload would drop them off. They all had their cameras, and the men were even posing, not just the men were posing. It was so funny. Anyway, I just want to remind you one final thing. It's scary about them going all over the world colonizing, but we have to remind ourselves that only American people have walked on the moon with about 10 trips maybe. So no other country has been there yet that we know of or that we've seen on our side of the moon. So thank you for your show. It's great to have our girl back, and that was so interesting. She said there were no Chinese tourists, and I remember, like I said, the Red Rock country, they were everywhere. They just, busloads, and they'd let them off, and they'd just take over an area. There were so many of them. So that they weren't in Europe, any of the 5 countries she went to. So thank you all. The show's great, really entertaining.
Thank you for calling, Shirley. We appreciate you waiting so long, and I promise the next time you call, I won't miss it. I'll actually look at the phone board once in a while.
No problem. And I do have to say thanks. I'm not sure if that was you or the guy who reminds me of your voice. I got 4 tickets for the air show, and I love supersonics. My husband, our first year of marriage was flying supersonics down at Arizona, flight school, and that's all they do is you hear jets all day long.
There's nothing better than flying fast.
No. I never got up in one, but I sure spent a lot of time around them, watched them take off and all that. So,
Shirley, thank you for the call. We greatly appreciate it.
Love your show. Bye-bye.
There you go. Shirley makes a great observation, the fact that around the world, as Amy points out, and as we've all been reading about, China is trying to, I think, exerting itself may be a polite way of. They're trying to insert themselves around the world in various countries for their own benefit, I guess is the best way to put it.
Well, what a clever form of political coercion. You just send drones of tourists to a location, so much so that you've become a major wing of the nation's economy, and then that country's government suddenly doesn't really want to criticize you about human rights abuses and things of that nature.
Well, it's funny. I've like Amy, I've been around the world of various places, and I've got to tell you, the description of the Chinese tourists in around the Grand Canyon. I'll tell you what, when my high school graduating class of 975 students got off the airplane in Osaka, I can only imagine what those poor people in Japan thought of us. All these high school kids from the United States showing up. I'll never forget getting on the commuter train as a tourist, and all these people around me were a foot shorter than me and packed into the train like sardines. I felt, what a cultural experience I'll never forget. And I know I stuck out like a sore thumb because I was 2 feet taller than everybody else on the train.
Well, one of the ways to, and that's changed, by the way, average heights.
I understand that. It was, this was a long time ago. I graduated from high school in 1975.
Right. but people started eating more beef and ended up taller. It's kind of an interesting fact. But at any rate, one of the ways I think you can measure the development opportunity in a place is to look at that relative difference. Shirley's descriptions of the difference in the quality of roads in different parts of Africa is something that I'm familiar with as well. If you're driving from Senegal to southern Senegal, you go through Gambia. And the moment in which you cross that border, the road goes from being a very nice road to being a dirt path that's next to what used to be the road. At least I heard it's been improved, but that was the last time I was there.
Oh man, I've got to tell you a quick story, just so you know. You know, my family's had a house in Mexico for years now. You know, and it used to be when you crossed the border into Mexico, the road went to hell in a handbasket, right? But the Mexican government has, you know, they want tourists and they want to have their big trucks be able to go from state to state in a hurry and not lose axles and things. So they've built these things called autopistas. They're toll roads, but the toll is minimal and the roads are beautiful, right? So now you cross the border in Nogales and you go into Mexico and the road immediately gets better and it stays better all the way to Guadalajara. And it's amazing because, you know, like your instance in Africa and like, it happens around the world when countries realize or municipalities realize that better roads are a good thing, they're willing to pay for them and things get better. But it's just interesting how it changes from year to year as to who has who's prosperous enough to build better roads.
Yeah, I mean, but you just think about the goodwill that is gained by going to a place where they're struggling to get water and just access to clean water. I mean, you could just go and help folks put in a couple solar powered wells, and suddenly the community absolutely loves you. And we're talking like. Doesn't cost anything. $4 million or something like that. I mean, I really gotta. China is making these inroads in Africa and South America and Southeast Asia, but I gotta hold the Western nations' feet to the fire on this one because I've been a big fan of the IMF and World Bank for a long time, and by big fan I mean absolutely not a fan. Because their strategy back in the late 90s was to send these over-entitled folks over to the various parts of the world who, people who have connections with Goldman Sachs and the whole sort of banking class, to go over and stay in the most fancy hotel that you can possibly imagine, have an unlimited budget to spend on what a great time they had over there, to stay in the nicest hotel in the country and work out a couple business deals with the elites, such that it was really not too different than the Belt and Road. It was a form of state capture. It was a elite capture, is what it was. Just get the elites bought into some kind of situation where they get extremely rich, but at the same time, you end up heavily indebting your country. And then the IMF comes in and says, well, you guys owe us all this money, so we're going to have to begin this structural readjustment process whereby all of your state-owned industries are going to be privatized, and they're going to be bought up by the Western companies who happen to be, happen to have graduated in the same class from Yale from the guy who made the deal to give you guys the loan. So that sort of, shall we call it, worst face of capitalism diplomacy that was practiced for, I would say, throughout the Cold War, at the very least, and then some, and then even worse into the dawning of globalization. That really dropped the ball. That's where the Western countries blew it with our. I mean, there's a lot of suspicion. in these same parts, they have as much suspicion of the U.S. coming, or one of the international functionaries behind the Western nations coming along and offering them a loan. They have as much suspicion of that as they do of China. China's just entered the business just recently. I'm advocating not for the Western countries not to be involved in this sort of stuff. I would just like it to be above the board. I would like it to be an honest mutual relationship.
But wouldn't we all want that? I mean, we all want trade to be above board. When it gets kind of seedy, nobody wants to be part of it, except the seedy guys.
Yeah. I mean, there's a problem with rule of law and oversight. These are problems both with China and with the West. And as I like to advocate for on this show, looking at China, looking at what China is doing, also gives us a window into what we're doing and how we can be doing it better.
Exactly, and that was kind of my point when I was talking about how China goes around the world and tries to ingratiate itself into various governments and various businesses and things, not so unlike the British did and the United States does whenever it can. I mean, let's be honest. I think the countries that move around the world and try to have international commerce are trying to do it, for their own benefit. But I think there ought to be some sort of unwritten rule, or maybe there should be some written rules about how you should not take advantage of economies that are in the position of being taken advantage of.
Well, a lot of these. Well, sorry, Amy, go ahead.
No, I think that they are very much interested in the resource.
Yes.
For Africa resource, because China is kind of lack of a resource. Lots of things people probably didn't know about it. Especially oil and then the other minerals, everything. So they're very much interested. Anywhere in poor countries, they have something, some resource. They just want to get it.
Yeah.
So, in Africa or Latin America, other little countries, whatever it is, Talking about the Chinese tourists, I want to share you a funny story. I think it's 1993, first time I went in Europe, in Venice. And so I come back, stay there overnight at Lido, little island, and then take a ferry back to Venice in the airport. So somebody took our pictures, and then he said, you got to come back, and you can, the ferry hop, at least a week of different little islands they have. And so it took about 20 years. 2013, finally, I get a chance to stay in Venice for 1 week. Just bought a ferry ticket, the pass, so you can hop to different islands. And at that time, I tell you, Chinese tourists are all over the place already in San Marcos Square. And then every little store, they are famous for this mask. Because Venice masquerade party, it's very famous. Carnival, yeah. So they all handmade those masks. So I get to those stores. Every store have in Chinese sign, don't take a picture, in Chinese words. So I asked them, I said, why in Chinese words say don't take a picture? You just say no photography, whatever, right? And then he said, you know why? He said, I'm so pissed off. He said, because they took a picture and then they go back to China, they make those masks.
Oh,
and they're selling. And they even dare to sell it in the same place on the square.
Oh.
So, those people, those are expensive because they're handmade. Hand-drawn, beautifully, right. Yeah. So they make, those cheap stuff, but that looks like it. And just sell it. So get them out of the business. Okay,
right.
So that's...
Wow.
Well, I think we may be heading for a less globalized world. If I was to read the tea leaves, I would say that's part of what's happening, and I actually want to say thank God. I think it's not necessarily
I think
a bad
it should
thing.
be. Yeah, I think especially for I'm talking about the EU, the European Union, and those little countries like a Canary Island, they belong to Spain, right? So before I visit, and you always get a little souvenir. They have those leather goods, some purse or some very cheap, $1 or $2 you can get. After they join the European Union, and then so everything's so expensive. Interesting enough, the gift shop are full of things made in China. So who want to go to Canary Island to buy gift made in China. I don't want to do that, right? But then they kill the local business.
No, it's a horrible idea. Go all the way to some remote island, and then
you look at
buy something from China. Yeah.
And then I talked to locals. They ruin their self-sufficient local business,
right?
Because they have a banana, Canary Island. They have all the cattle ranch, everything. But since the EU, they tell them you cannot banana. We can get from Mexico cheaper, so you don't need the banana. What are you gonna do? Kill all burn those trees or what? And then the cattle ranchers say, well, we don't need those leather goods. We can import from Mexico. It's cheap.
Right.
It's just, that's like a planned economy, like a Soviet Union that time, So that's lots of little countries that you're ruining their self-sufficient. And then afterwards, you wanted to restore. It's hard because it's gone.
Because you've already you destroyed traditional businesses. How long did it take to create those indigenous economic structures? And you just came along and let somebody else flood the market with cheap goods. It's devastating.
Same goes. Yeah.
I wonder too how you affect the culture of a place where you've had an
tradition.
You have a traditional.
craftsmanship
and art and all of that, and then it gets destroyed in a matter of minutes, it seems like, and then that whole infrastructure that had that business and that artisanship and that culture all around that business that they were making things, that all gets destroyed, and then you change the way people live in that little country.
In China's defense, we showed them how to do it. I mean, the United States has had a culture that came along in, I think it really didn't get really rolling until the late 60s and 70s, where it was sort of the McDonaldization of the economy.
They call American embassy everywhere. It's like ISO. I tell you, I go to Morocco, right? The beautiful. I don't want to see this arch everywhere.
Yeah.
But they're there everywhere. American embassy, they call.
Well, the other thing, too, is we're really good at replicating what works in a particular location. So you can go to Kansas City and see exactly the same mall that you see in Sacramento.
Exactly.
That's why I say that Anytown, USA.
Yeah.
Anytown, USA.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I don't know how we got so far off that topic, but I do want to say that Yahoo has become the second major American firm to pull completely out of China over the past month. A 20-year battle went on with the Communist Party. Yahoo finally said, you know what, we're not doing this anymore.
Yeah.
And they have moved out of China, and they have decided to say publicly that they are not going back.
I've got some stories to tell about Yahoo, because I find this particularly interesting. Yahoo was always the company that I was absolutely disgusted with for just rolling over backwards and doing whatever the CCP wanted. I mean, that was my impression. They got in a lot of trouble because they were handing over private emails of Chinese citizens, and it actually got 2 folks arrested and put in prison. There was something about them. I don't know what they were doing, but they Yahoo's been in trouble for this sort of thing before. Now, I was managing email delivery issues for a substantial online newspaper in 2012 during the whole Occupy Wall Street movement.
Right.
And there was this one guy emails us, and he said, I don't know why, but I'm not getting your newsletters. I've whitelisted you guys. I've done everything I'm supposed to do to get your newsletters. I'm still not getting them. And I said, okay, well, let me look into it. And he actually handed over the password to his account. He said, gee, you just figure it out. You tell me what's going on. What I found was that if I sent an email to that box that contained the word occupy, it wouldn't arrive in the box. Not in spam. It just wouldn't arrive in his email box.
Wow.
I could send any other email saying anything else, but just that one word had been look to me, I don't know. I mean, we would need an FBI investigation to find out what was really going on here. But it sure looked to me like Yahoo was blocking some accounts that were trying to send emails related to the Occupy Wall Street movement. In my mind, that's not something that an ISP should be doing. That is what the Great Wall of China, Great Firewall of China does. That's not supposed to be what American companies do. And I've told that story to folks, and I've always been, Google was early on very disgusted with what they were being asked to do by the CCP, and they ended up pulling out of China. Somewhat. They sort of put one leg out of China is what they really did, but they still were dramatically more proactive than Yahoo has been. So when they say after a 20-year battle with the CCP, put that in quotes, because it's more like after 20 years of cooperating with the CCP.
Did you remember that before the public hearing about the trial, remember they were given the list, those political anti-CCP people's name, their PR address, everything to Chinese government, remember?
Exactly.
They had the Congress hearing, everything,
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
I think there was a hearing in the Senate about it. That's right. Exactly.
Yeah. And then private lawsuit, I think that they settled, they paid the family, the people were in jail, and paid some money. And so it settled. But they're in U.S. court, of course.
Right.
So they are never an angel to me.
Right. I totally agree. Well said, Amy. Absolutely.
Very well said, actually.
So why are they pulling out now? I mean, it's...
Oh, come on. You know the reason why they're pulling out now. It became too much of a hassle for them to make a whole pile of money. They'll just go somewhere else and do it.
Yeah, could be. I mean, it could be that there's also a lot of political pressure.
Sure, it became too big a hassle to make a whole pile of money. I mean, look, my grandfather was right. I keep saying this. You want to know how it's going down? Follow the money.
Well, it could also be a sort of a PR move on Yahoo's part. How much business did they have in China? I mean, I don't know. That could have really dwindled down to where it wasn't very much.
Not much market share. You're right.
Well, look, how much business does Yahoo have anywhere right now compared to what they used to have, remember? Yeah. I mean, Yahoo was a big deal for a while there.
Yeah, in the beginning,
It's kind of like AOL. What happened to them?
Yeah.
Whoops.
Yeah, what happened to AOL?
Something happened to AOL? I was about to log on.
with your 56K modem?
That's right. We used to call it almost online.
Yeah.
Yeah, almost online.
Yeah. Well, the whole thing about this watch we are doing, this look at how China operates around the world is fascinating, and it will get more and more fascinating as we move through various things, such as the pandemic. We really didn't get to some of the topics we wanted to talk about, but there is some work on what's going on in China regarding how COVID-19 is perceived. A letter to Lawrence Tabek, the National Institutes of Health Principal Deputy Director to Kentucky Congressman James Comer, confirms that the NIH-funded research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology during the 2018 to 2019 period. This research apparently manipulated a bat coronavirus called WIVI1. Researchers at the Institute grafted spike proteins from other coronaviruses onto this protein to see if the modified virus was capable of binding in a mouse that possessed the ACE2 receptors found in humans. Anyway, it goes on and on and on. We didn't even get to that story. And,
I mean, doesn't this stuff just... Honestly, Billy, I went through that article. It is important just to be aware that it's very important, I think, to hit your head against a hard surface.
Yeah.
Just be aware that that's important. They're now saying, essentially what they're saying is, and I'll be brief, I know we're up against the break here, that don't worry about it being gain of function. Worry if it's gain of function research of concern.
Yeah. They're sort of changing their. What's that called when you move the goalpost? You know, they're moving the goalposts around so the kicker can't get it through the. Anyway.
No, I mean, 7 million dead, 70 trillion cost to the global economy. I would think there would be something equivalent to firing squads.
Oh, we're completely out of time. I do want to make just a moment before we go to our last commercial break. Amy, it's great to have you back. Great.
Absolutely.
Thank you. You guys
so
did
much
a
for
good
joining
job.
us.
Keep the shows going. Right?
Okay.
No business like a show business. You did such a good job.
Take it easy. Hopefully we'll talk to you soon. Okay. All right. That's Amy Howe, and we want to thank her for joining us. She's just fresh off her trip to Europe. Listen, Jonty, thanks for joining me. I'm going to get this commercial break out of the way, okay?
Awesome. Satisfy your hunger with a fresh, prepared, twice-daily grab-and-go sushi you'll find waiting for you at Sushi Market Sprouts, 2 blocks from the beach at 300 7th Avenue in Santa Cruz. Fresh, delicious, and oh so good.
Hello, I'm Junko, and I look forward to serving you at the Sushi Market Sprouts.
Hi, I'm Deidre Bennett, and I am the owner of Zinnia's Gift Boutique in Scotts Valley, California. Zinnia's is an experience. It's not just about coming in to shop. It's about coming in to browse with your cup of coffee or your tea from next door. It's about someplace to come to put a smile on your face when maybe you need a little warming. It's a friendly place just to say hi. No one is on commission in our store. It's about coming in and being in a community. And the community supports me, and my cup runneth over at how supported I am. And so I want to give that support back to all of our community members and our customers. We've got local artists that do our jewelry. We've got things from third world countries. We've got gifts for men. And most of it we try to source locally. Zinnia's is located at 219C Mount Herman Road in the Graham Plaza next to Starbucks. Our number is 831-430-9466. And follow us on Facebook and Instagram at zinniasgiftboutique.com.
When there's work to do, ground to break, earth to move, and a reputation to uphold, you need the durable Kubota RTVX. Built with half-ton capabilities, industry-exclusive heavy-duty features, and a cargo bed that easily transitions into a second row of seating. The RTVX is North America's #1 selling diesel utility vehicle. Visit your local Kubota dealer and test drive one today. Go to KubotaUSA.com for full disclaimer.
C&N Tractors in Watsonville and Paso Robles makes it so easy to get a Kubota. Give us your tough jobs.
At Batteries Plus, we do more than fix phones and tablets. We help our neighbors power their lives. Visit Batteries Plus in-store, curbside, and online for fast and reliable phone and tablet repair. Learn more at batteriesplus.com.
Jonty, thank you so much for doing all the research for this show. We appreciate it very much.
Absolute pleasure, Billy, and thanks for keeping the conversation going. It was so great to have Amy back today. I'm really chuffed, overjoyed.
Yeah, me too. All right, that's our program for this week. Stay tuned for Flight 1080. This is KSCO Santa Cruz, Salinas, Monterey.